Blessings. Welcome to today's Law Enforcement Daily Devotional. Today we're in Genesis 46 and 47. Had a great read up to this point in Genesis. Love this story of Joseph. It's one that we all know. Him interpreting dreams and being in charge of Egypt during this famine and saving his family. And that's really what God that was his path. Even though there was huge bumps and roadblocks in the road to get to this path, and he had to endure a lot of bad circumstances. The point was to save his family, and he had to do a lot of sacrificing to save his family, but God blessed him all along the way, and it's just a really cool story. We talked yesterday about Judah taking this backseat leadership kind of role, and we see him doing it again today in chapter 46, verse 28. Judah steps up one more time, and he's taken the leading role in this family. 46 is all about just this list of 70 people in this family that come to Egypt. And I think it's part of why it's in there and important is to show that there were only 70 that showed up in Egypt. But 400 years later, when Moses leads them out of Egypt, there's hundreds of thousands. I mean, God has continued to bless them in bad circumstances and increase their population in this protected environment of Egypt. Even though they were slaves, God grew them during this time so that they could come out and have enough people to be a nation of their own. Just a ready-made population. It's incredible how God works through all of this. So we jump into chapter 47. And the big revelation, or the big takeaway for me from today's read, was when Pharaoh was talking to the brothers, and he said, "So what's your occupation? What's your profession? What do you guys do?" And they say, "We are shepherds, just like our fathers were shepherds." When I read this, I thought, I don't remember where it said Abraham was a shepherd in charge of big flocks. I don't remember where Jacob was a shepherd in charge of all these flocks. I do remember where Isaac worked for Laban, and remember he was a shepherd, and he kind of tricked Laban into giving him most of the crops, like the speckled and the striped sheep, and how he would have them mate. And I've never understood how he figured all that out, but he knew how to do it in a way that he would walk away with, let's just say, 80% of the flock and leave Laban with 20% of the flock. It's incredible. He was a shepherd, though. He knew his sheep. But if you think back on Abraham had herds. He had workers that were shepherds for him, but he was the overall shepherd. He was like the chief, and he had lieutenants and sergeants, so he may not have actually got in there with the sheep, but he was the head shepherd of all these flocks, and their flocks grew so big. If you remember, he and Lot were sitting on a hill, and they're like, "Man, we've got way too many sheep. We're going to have to split, and you take that half of the land, and I'll take this half of the land." Well, that was the same way with Jacob. We remember when he would send Joseph out, and Joseph would go out and watch his brothers tending sheep, and he would bring back a bad report about his brothers. So it's true that they had this line of shepherds in their family, which continues because these are the patriarchs. This is where the family of David would come through, and it would come through the leadership of Judah. It's cool that we see that, and we'll see that in a blessing, I think probably tomorrow. But David comes from this line of shepherds, and what is David when we see him as a boy? He's a shepherd. He's out tending the sheep. Later on, the greatest person that ever came out of this family line is Jesus Christ himself. And who is he? He's the good shepherd. So it's just such a neat verse where we see this lineage of shepherding and leading people well that runs all the way through their family history, and just this wonderful legacy that's there. So anyway, chapter 47 ends with Joseph saving all the people from this incredible famine. And I think it's interesting that it mentions that people come in and they just give all their money until they have no more money, and they buy up all the food, and they say, "We don't have any money." And Joseph says, "Well, give me your flocks." So they give him all their sheep and all their donkeys and horse and cattle. Then when they run out, he says, "Well, give me all your land." So they give him the deeds to all their land. And then, like, into the third or fourth year, they've still got 3 years of famine left. And they're like, now what? And Joseph says, well, from now on, you will give you back the land and you will work it, but you will be an employee of Pharaoh and you owe him 20% of every one of your crops. So they're taxed heavily. But we see Joseph taking control of the government. And then very quickly, the next Pharaoh doesn't remember Joseph. Why? Because the Pharaoh he's working for now takes credit for everything he did. And Joseph doesn't get mentioned, and the Israelites and the Hebrews are forgotten about, and they become slaves. So all part of God's plan, though, an awesome plan, and we're seeing it being worked out. Come back tomorrow and let's read Genesis 48 through 50. We're going to finish Genesis tomorrow, and we're going to finish this great story of Joseph. So I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Be blessed and be safe.